Also, this session is being recorded, and I will make it available on mcflis.org after the session. We do have a McFlis YouTube channel where I'm also going to be storing this in case you don't have the ability to log into the mcflis.org site or you don't want to. If you do a YouTube search for McFlis 1, MCFLS numeral 1, you'll see our YouTube channel there, and you'll be able to see all the videos for all of the sessions. Okay, goals for this training. The primary goal is to give you what you need to know to be able to work with Sierra on April 2nd and moving forward, so that when we hit April 2nd, you'll be able to hit the ground running and start doing your workflows that you're used to doing, to give you an idea of what you're going to be expecting. The secondary goal is to give you assurance that most of the functions work in exactly the same way as they do in Millennium. Those of you who had a chance to see the interface already will hopefully agree with that. Also, before we get into looking at the specifics of the interface, I wanted to give you some idea of what the timetable looks like for our implementation. The staff preview mode, which is the kind of the I don't know what you were going to call it, just it's a preview mode. You can actually work with the interface before we go live. This preview mode was supposed to start yesterday, but we're having some problems with setting up a specific type of login for Milwaukee Public staff. This doesn't affect acquisition staff at Milwaukee, but any of the circulation and rotating staff at Milwaukee Public need to be set up with a specific type of login. So we're waiting on that to be fixed. I'm hopeful that that will be done today or tomorrow, and then we can open up what we're calling this preview mode. In this preview mode, when this does become available, you'll be able to log in, check some of your settings, your printers, but you're not going to be able to see everything or make edits to records, send purchase orders, etc. It's more or less a way to look at the data, check your settings, and get comfortable with the interface. They have completely seeded the database with all of our bibliographic records, item records, all the records you're familiar with, including order records. There's some updates that will need to take place on April 2nd to get us up to where we left off on April 1st with Millennium. That's what they're doing when they bring us completely down on April 2nd. In this preview mode, if you're prevented from doing certain operations, it's not because of your authorizations. It's locked down for everyone, including myself. So this is why we're using this training server, so you can actually see everything. When we do go into preview mode, hopefully this week, I'll send a complete list of instructions on what you should be checking for. Obviously, the ability to log in, check your printers, look at your settings. This is particularly important for acquisitions work because there's a lot of settings related to acquisitions that we'll actually take a look at here that I'd like you to check when we go into this preview mode. April 2nd is still our go live date. The system will be unavailable the entire day, similar to January 20th. The same procedures we used to prepare for that day will be used on for April 2nd. So that, I know for Milwaukee Public, that meant doing things the week before, which would be March 28th, or in yours, it might actually be April 1st. Virginia can correct me on that later. But the same things that we did for January 20th are the things we're going to be doing for April 2nd. It's identical. So that means stop ordering, clear payment history. I'll send out a complete list of all this information to you at least 2 weeks before the April 2nd date, so that would be sometime in mid-March. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is go through the basics of Sierra, how to log in, how to search, and then we'll focus on those elements that are specific to acquisitions work. And you'll see it's going to be very anticlimactic because in all honesty, it's not very different from what you're seeing in Millennium. The biggest challenges we'll have are logging in, first off, and making sure your settings are correct, your printers, your macros, all that type of stuff. So those will be the biggest challenges. Most of everything else is going to work the same come April 2nd. But we'll go through all of this, and then we'll take questions at the end of the session. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing everything on the screen here. Just going to move my interface here. The biggest, one of the big differences with Sierra is for the vast majority of you, both MPL acquisitions and suburban staff as a whole, you no longer will be using a general login such as Cent MACQ or GRND MACQ, your acquisitions login. That's no longer necessary. All of the settings, printers, your macros, all of that has been merged into your initials in Sierra. So you only have one login that you have to worry about, and everything's concentrated into that one login. For the Milwaukee Public circulation staff, those that rotate, they will have to use the older method that we've used with Millennium, where they have to have a generic login that sets their location served. It's very important for circulation, anything, frankly, and also sets their printer settings and things like that. So they have to do that old type of method to make it work for them. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here to their training server. Now this is located in California, so if this might take just a few seconds to warm up here. So I'm just going to go ahead and log in here. While we're doing this, I did want to just validate the fact that all the modules and functions in Millennium have counterparts in Sierra. So whatever you see in Millennium, you should be able to do in Sierra. Okay, so we're logged in now to the training server. It's called the Grizzly Demo University Library, God knows what reason. But this is what your interface is going to look like, or very similar to this in Sierra. One of the things we can't do yet in preview, but you will be able to do when we go live, is if you go to admin, you'll notice that there is now a change password function at the very top of this admin menu. And if I click on this, I can actually change my password within the Sierra client, and I no longer have to go to the Telnet version. For all intents and purposes, when we go live on April 2nd, the Telnet version will no longer be useful. Almost all the functionality is going to be moved into the Sierra client. There will be some exceptions to that. I'm sure some of you may still use the Telnet or SSH client, the blue screen, for some of your functions, but most, if not all of those, are going to be ported over to Sierra, and we'll be able to hash out what needs to be addressed with that. But for the most part, that Telnet or SSH client is going to be like an admin area where I would have access to coding or settings that only an admin would need to look at. You'll notice one of the other nice parts about Sierra is, as you know, with Millennium, you have to use the modules to move from one section to another. So if I'm in cataloging and I need to do serials work, then I would need to choose the Millennium button at the top. I'll just bring it up here. I'm in acquisitions. and then move from one module to the next. With Sierra, that's no longer necessary. All of the functions that you have will be available underneath this function drop-down. So at present, I'm in catalog mode, but I can, if I'm set up for these particular areas, I can just select anything I want. So for example, serials check-in. If I want to go to my acquisitions area, I can go to place orders, which is where we're going to kind of camp out here. It doesn't look too much different, but it's each one of these functions here should be identical to what you're using now in Millennium. We'll go through this in a second more thoroughly. This command menu at the top, File, Edit, View, Go, Tools, Admin, it's very much similar to what you're using now in Millennium, and you can kind of compare and see what they actually look like. But they are context sensitive for a few areas. Place orders might be one, but I'm thinking of catalog mode. That's one that comes up quite a bit, and also underneath circulation, search holds mode. It's just different ways of looking at the same database. But in those areas, you'll see underneath tools, there's a neat little function called browse query, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, but it's only available underneath that tools command menu option. Underneath this function drop-down, you'll see all these sections here: cataloging, student, serials check-in, front desk circ. Down lower on the list, we have acquisitions, cataloging, circulation. These are the equivalent of the modules that you had in Millennium. So if you can consider that this would be acquisitions module. And then everything underneath here, first of all, these are called workflows now. Cataloging workflow, acquisitions workflow, whatever you come across here with these headings is called a workflow. And then everything underneath acquisitions, in this case, is the functions. So all of the functions should match up with the buttons that we had, or very similar to the buttons that we had in Millennium. So if we just take a quick look at that, you can kind of get an idea. They're not exactly the same, but they're very similar to those buttons that we had in Millennium. One thing that is different, however, is the macros, particularly underneath the Go command menu. With Millennium, if we can sneak back here for just a second, the Go menu was always based on the module that you were in. So I'm in acquisitions mode, and my Go menu is all set up to look at everything related to acquisitions. So send, wrapper, receive, invoice, port invoices, so on and so forth. With Sierra, it's different because you have to account for all these different workflows. So acquisitions now has a separate level up and above what was usually on this first level here for Millennium. So you have to account for that when you're setting up your macros. I know that those in tech services tend to use the macros a lot more than, say, others. All of those macros that you have been using, particularly those that had not been using these Go commands, are still okay in Sierra. They've been transferred over. They've been migrated with the rest of your data. So those don't need to be recreated. We did have to modify any macro using this Go menu to accommodate this extra step. So you may see some issues with that, and that's one of the things we're going to ask people to check once we go into preview mode, hopefully later this week. As with Millennium, just because you see a function here underneath the acquisitions area, does not mean that you necessarily have access to that. So if you are not set up for authorizations to receive or print send orders, you're not going to be able to do it here in Sierra. All those authorizations have been brought over as well with your initials. So there shouldn't be any real changes between the two. You'll notice also that some of these workflows look a little different. We have a very stripped down version of serials check-in up here, but if you look below, we have a very lengthy list of functions underneath this version of serials. What's really nice about Sierra is that we can set up custom workflows. When we go live on April 2nd, we're going to pretty much give everyone everything, even if it's not part of their job, just because we want to make sure everybody can do what they need to do on April 2nd moving forward. The only exception obviously would be MPL acquisitions. I think you guys only have the acquisitions workflow and serials, I should say. Both of those two should be part of what you have. And we can sort those out before April 2nd goes live. Another really nice part of Sierra that's kind of an added benefit is because of the PostgreSQL database that we're using, there should be no more locked or busied records as part of this. So on occasion in Millennium you would have issues where records would become locked and they wouldn't become unlocked, so people could make edits. So you would have to free them up. There was always this admin free records in use function that we had, and they left it in here, but I don't think it's going to be necessary when we go to Sierra. This is kind of a circulation example, but it's one of those things where with e-commerce this was a big problem when we were doing backups and patron records were locked because the backup was running, and then someone couldn't pay their fines or would get an error message because basically the record was locked and they couldn't do anything. So it's just one example, but it's a nice modern database that allows you to make separate edits on the same record at the same time, and is able to function correctly with that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is take a look at some of the specifics regarding the database. So I'm going to go into acquisitions and place orders mode. And as you can see here, I have a very similar looking search interface to what we have in Millennium. I think it's a lot nicer in terms of how it's laid out. But this is very similar to what we currently have. The indexes here that you see, title, serials, author, these are specific to this training server that we're on. Our actual CountyCat version of Sierra will have all the same indexes that we're currently using in Millennium, which if we look here underneath orders is all of these listed here. Nothing's going to change with regard to that. Just going to do a quick search for Inferno, just to give you an idea what to look for. If I type in the title index for Inferno, just click on search. I wanted to point out a few areas here. There's a lot that has changed with regard to the search results and what you get with that. First off, you have your search results in the center frame here. But you'll also notice off to the right-hand side of the screen, we have a couple of new columns here. One is a summary column that gives you availability, gives you the bib number first, availability, whether or not there's at least one item available on this particular bib, and how many items are attached. I think, yeah, and it does list orders, how many orders are attached as well. So any attached records, basically. When we're set up correctly, we will have in this preview column a look at the book jacket. So the book jackets will appear in this preview column. One of the really nice parts about Sierra that I think will be helpful for all the staff is this little icon you see with the eye surrounded by a circle. If you mouse over that icon, it gives you a nice little summary of the title. So if you don't want it to look at everything regarding that particular bib record, you could just mouse over the eye and it will give you information such as added title, addition, that type of thing. You'll find this throughout Sierra, not only with bibliographic records, but also for patron records, if you're interested in that part. Off to the left-hand side, we have these facets that are very similar to what we're using in our current Encore. It's a much more stripped-down version of it, but it will include format, language, locations, availability, and phrase. I'm not sure about the phrase, how that's brought out. That might be part of the subject headings. But these are available in all workflows as well. It's not just limited to acquisitions, but you'll see it here in acquisitions when you are in place orders, the place orders function. Up above here, you'll see this little plus sign here. You'll notice that there is no limit function on these buttons on the far right-hand side. But if you click on the plus sign, this is where all your limiting functions are. I think this will work a lot better in Sierra than it ever did in Millennium, mostly because of the indexing that's been taking place. We're using what's called Lucene indexing, which should improve the index and return of the results for that. But everything you see in Millennium with regard to limiting is available here, including the ability to add more than one field to limit by. For example, material type, if I wanted to choose map, different types of maps, I could do a quick limit by that. But you can do the same thing here that you can do in Millennium if you're using this function. I think it's just, I just need to do now we just use the limit function here, and it does somewhat similar types of things. And then you can choose multiple limits from this screen as well. Okay, and if we go into the full record, I just wanted to show you that. Take this one. You'll see the layout here is a little different, but the information is essentially the same, very similar to what we're using here in Millennium. Instead of the tabs that we had been using within Millennium here, I'll just go back there real quick. We have summary, record, receive, selection list, all this type of stuff that you're used to seeing in Millennium. A lot of that information is now on the left-hand side of the screen. So if we wanted to view all, there's just one record attached here. But then the record number here, if we click on that, it gives us the item record and any item level or bib level holds attached to that particular record. I'm going to go back one step here. I'm going to highlight an order. I guess that's not going to work. My apologies. Okay, so the tabs that you had normally seen above the summary display here have now been put as buttons here on the left-hand side of the screen. I think the layout's a lot better. It just gives a lot more real estate to display the contents of the record and the attached records. If I go into full record display, all those buttons that you are used to seeing here at the top are also still here. You go into edit record, and it looks very similar to Millennium. What they did here was try to match what OCLC likes to use in terms of the layout of the tags and the indicators. The shading here that you see for the subfields, for in this case C, D, and D, those I believe can be changed at some point. But this is the default that I believe Innovative uses for highlighting subfields in full records. And just to reiterate, all the coding that we use in Millennium has been brought over to Sierra. So our version of material type will include all of the areas that we have in Millennium, all of these different coding areas, location, country, bib code. Well, we use bib code. It's actually cat flag in our system, cat date, bib level. All those things are going to be brought over into Sierra for our system. So everything should be there. One thing that should highlight too is, particularly if you're working with tech services, I think you'll see this a lot. If you want to go back to your browse results, you don't have to recreate your search. All you have to do is click on this back to browse button. That's something that's a little bit new in Sierra that you don't see in Millennium. If you click on that, you'll go back to your browse results and you'll see your information here. Oh, I forgot to point out, these facets here are not just for information as far as like locations, formats. You can actually double click on these and limit your results to a specific location if that's what you're after. So it works very similar to what we're doing with Encore. There's a lot of very similar type functions. Okay, but one thing I do want to mention that's new in Sierra, and I kind of referred to it before, was underneath the Tools menu, there is this new thing called Browse Query. It's a little different. It's really a neat thing that you can use within your search results. When you click on Browse Query, it looks like it's got the same layout as if you were creating a list, but it's really not creating a list. It's pulling information from the database into your search results. I'll use a circulation example here because it's pretty simple, but you can do this for any of your order record fields or anything that you're working with. If you wanted to find particularly a piece of information that is not indexed, for example, in our system, patron phone numbers and email addresses are not indexed. So there's really no quick way to look those up in a search using the search box up here. You have to create a list, wait for the list to run, and then you see your search results there. Here, I can do a really quick search for a patron phone number, just use that as an example. And we'll just look for 555. So we just assume our patron has a phone number of that has 5555 somewhere in their patron record. If we do a quick search for that, it brings it up very quickly and it puts it into your search results. So there's no real way to save this information. It's just bringing it into a search result area that you can use to then look at the record. So if we wanted to look at Tim Techie's patron record, this is how we would do it. And then we could go back to browse. So you can kind of get a sense about how you could use this for acquisitions work if you're looking for a particular fund code, that matches a specific set of criteria that you want to bring up right away. You can do it with the browse query, and it's only available in modes such as place orders, where you're looking at the data. We have this search interface for the database. That's the only place it's going to come up. But as you can see, we're in place orders mode, but we're actually bringing up patron records. So it doesn't matter what you're looking at, what type of record you're looking at, you can bring it into this browse query. So it's really neat. It's not great for large result sets. I've used it in our preview mode, and I'm not sure if it's just because we're in preview mode or something else, but if you're bringing up large result sets, it can take a little while for it to process and bring all those results into your view. But if you're looking for something very specific that has a very limited number of results that can bring up, this is actually a really neat tool that I think a lot of people will find useful. The other thing I wanted to point out regarding browse query is that you can use it with existing searches. This is referring to existing create list queries that are out there on the database, or you can bring in or retrieve a saved query that you've saved to the database already. So it's using some of those create list functions, but it's got a very different type of scope to it. Okay, so as far as specific acquisitions functions, there's a few things I'd like for you to check when we go into preview mode. If you could write this down. Sorry, we're not in preview mode already. But there are some things, particularly for those of you in acquisitions, that we'll need to check when we go live. And I'll send out an email to everyone to have them check this. But for acquisitions in particular, I wanted to make sure that you guys were on top of this. The first thing I would like you to check is under admin settings. You'll notice that because we're combining both settings from the initials and from the general login, your MACQ login, that we've got a lot more information in the settings area than we ever did in Millennium. So that's good and bad because you have to check everything too to make sure it's going to work. What I'd like you to do is verify the settings that you see here when you log into your Sierra login in preview mode this week, and verify what you have in Millennium against what you have in Sierra, just to kind of make sure that everything looks the same. The first area here is the new records. This is a setting that's going to be a little different for your login based on what you were using in Millennium. The options for new records is one of those areas that we'd like to have you verify, particularly if you're doing a lot of acquisitions or ordering. Using today's date as order date, receive date, and queue purchase orders for records. This may be a little different based on what login that you were using, but it should hopefully match up. Also down below here, records to attach to new bibliographic records. Verify what you have in Millennium is what you're going to be seeing here in Sierra. So if we go back to Millennium, for example, go to admin settings here in Millennium, you'll see that there's a lot, that all this information is here as well. So we need to see if everything for options for new order records matches up with what you have in Sierra, as well as this area down below here, records to attach to new bib records. And you'll go back to Sierra. Another area to check is your templates. It's underneath record templates here. And just verify that what you see here under preferred templates is what you have in Millennium, particularly for order records. This is going to be different, obviously, because it's a training server. But if I go back to Millennium and look at record templates, let's see it here. Yes, there it is. You'll notice that I have my preferred template is brief for brief bib record suburbs. Order, I don't have anything. Check in. All these types of things. It's not critical that these things work day one, but it will help with getting you working as quickly as possible, because otherwise you would have to choose the correct template whenever you're creating a new order record. Also within the settings area here there's an option for invoices. Let's see if I can find this. Yep, at the top, import invoice. If you're doing importing of invoices, I think this is only something that MPL Acquisitions is doing, just to verify that this information is correct. And also session statistics. We have that set up in my account here to view session statistics upon closing. I know it's a big deal for folks doing cataloging work. Not sure about the acquisition side, but I'm assuming that is probably something you keep track of as well. If this box is not checked here and you need it to be checked, just let me know. And that goes for any of these settings. In Sierra, at this point, the only people that can save these settings permanently are the MICLIS staff, either Kate or myself. And you can just let us know if there's something that needs to be changed, that we can do this for your login, and we can do it fairly quickly for you. And that's something that we'd like to do between now and April 2nd, while we have time to do it. The rest of this area here, we'll go through each one of these acquisitions functions. Place orders has virtually the same interface. We just took a look at that, so that's not much of a change. The only difference being all these the facets and some of the results lists here. If we take a look at print send orders, it looks a little different than Millennium. If we go back into Millennium and do print send orders, you can see there's a lot of similarities between this interface and then what you see here. Maybe just some different settings that they're using on the training server, but what you see here is pretty much what you're going to see in Millennium. And while we're talking about printing and sending orders, I do want to also talk about electronic ordering. A lot of you use Baker & Taylor or BWI to send electronic orders or grab the vendor records and put them into the database. That process is also going to work the same. So if we go into, I think Data Exchange is here. It's not, I'll have to look for it. This is actually part of the acquisitions functions in our preview mode, so it is there. But if we click on Data Exchange, I don't have any processes here, but it looks identical to what we're currently doing in Millennium. If I'm authorized for certain processes, they'll show up here, and then I can choose them. So there's really no difference there either. The next area I wanted to talk about was import invoices. This is something that I believe only a few libraries are doing at the moment, importing invoices. And one of the things Virginia mentioned when we were talking about this was this comment here at the bottom, 1 shipment, maximum of 7 shipments. These refer to just the shipments, not the number of invoices. You can have quite a few invoices for each of these, but that's something Virginia may set me straight on. One of the things that did change a little bit was this function for pay an invoice. So in Millennium, I believe, let's see here, it's called invoice in Millennium, but it's referred to in Sierra as pay an invoice. And you'll notice that we no longer have these hierarchies that we have in Millennium. You have to go into Invoice, click on this Invoice button, and then it goes down one level so you can invoice and then browse invoices if you wanted to. In Sierra, because of everything kind of being put together, you no longer have these top level buttons that go down one section. So we don't have to worry about everything is kind of visible here right on the top drop down. So to my knowledge, everything is the same here. If you wanted to post an invoice session, you just select the session you were after and then click on post or select or post all. If we go into funds mode, I just want to show you how that looks. Okay, so this is their test server and all of the funds that they've put on here. As you can see, it looks very similar to what you're using now. Of course, these buttons now are, that used to be tabs. If we go back to Millennium, you'll see funds, activity, adjustment. All of these are tabs in Millennium, but in Sierra, they are buttons here on the left-hand side. So if I click on activity or adjustment, all of those, let's just do some kind of test here. I don't think there's anything here. Your pie chart, your bar chart, activity, all these reports should look identical to what you're doing right now. And if we go into, let's see, I just got kicked out of here. If I go into vendors, okay. So if I do a quick search here, maybe not. Okay, I guess it didn't come up with anything. Okay, that's supposed to be more. Okay, so your vendor records, as they are in Millennium, will work the same way here in Sierra. You'll notice we also have this little I for this particular vendor. Whatever appears here is going to be based on what information is in the record. There's not a whole lot in this, but you can see they have their vendor code 3 is at fact very identical to what we're using. The vendor SAN information, email, all this information is the same as we're looking at in Millennium, so nothing's really changed there. As you can see, the vendors and invoices are now buttons here instead of tabs. Two more areas I just wanted to point out here. Your status reports. Let's see if we can find those. Can't see the status reports. So I swear I saw it on here the other day, so I apologize. Oh, here it is, status reports. Okay, there's nothing there. So that's kind of anticlimactic too. But these should work identically to what you're currently using in Millennium as well. Just you can see there's a theme going on here with these buttons on the left-hand side. Everything's kind of been moved from tabs to buttons. And lastly, fiscal close. There is nothing I can do here, but this is just another option that's available in acquisitions. Okay, so that's just a real quick rundown of acquisitions in Sierra. There's really not a whole lot of differences. However, I did want to mention some of the known issues that I've been made aware of that you would probably need to know about when we go live. These might be fixed by the time we go live, but these are active current issues that are part of their software engineering group. There are some incorrect orders displayed for claiming, so when staff search for claimable order records in claim cancel orders function, the system displays the first order attached to the bib and not the order that is actually claimable if that order is not the first attached order. So basically it's displaying the wrong order record attached to the bib. The claimable order record number does display on the left in the record tab even when an incorrect order record is displayed in full view. So that's one issue that you may want to be aware of. Second is for selection lists. There's an unexpected data not ready message that appears in the record number column for some or all orders. And we'll have to see how that works on our system. It may not be an issue. And that there's a problem using the find feature in the funds function. The % spend query doesn't bring back correct fund results based on search criteria specified. So for example, a search for a list of funds that are greater than 50% fails to return correct results. So we'll have to also see how that works in our system. Okay, that's pretty much everything I have to talk about. At this time, I'd be happy to, well, actually, I'm going to unmute Virginia. Virginia's on the line with us. And Virginia, could you give your thoughts about the interface or some other things that I may have missed in talking about this?
I didn't think you missed much. Some things you didn't go into, like create lists and whatnot. That is something that on the preview we can't utilize right now anyway.
Right.
But I think you did cover everything else pretty much, and it is just a different view, similar to how they upgrade other websites, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I wanted to point out, you said for April 2nd we're going live.
Right.
We're stopping all of our ordering operations on the Friday before.
Okay.
So that the only thing we have left to do on March 31st is our fund activity report. And then we're set for all of our acquisitions activity being stopped at that point.
Okay.
So that, that's how we're planning how to do that thing in there. So we're not ordering and paying one day and then we have to take it off on the 1st.
Right, right. That sounds like a great plan. And I'm glad you mentioned that because particularly for tech services, I need to make a point of this. We've mentioned this with Milwaukee Public, so they're the folks that need to know about this the most, but they have told us to not do major record loads after March 24th, about a week before we go live, and that's because the database process that seeds changes to the database needs to be able to accommodate the record changes as they happen. So, for example, as we're making record changes today, we're adding records, bib records, item records. All those changes are being seeded onto our Sierra database. It's a totally separate database that we'll be using live on April 2nd. So if you make a ton of record changes, like you load a bunch of records, like say over 400, 500 records at once after March 24th, it may delay the time needed to for us to go live on April 2nd because that process of seeding needs to be able to accommodate that and kind of catch up more or less. So that's a very important point that I've omitted here, which I apologize for. But for the suburban libraries, you're not going to be changing much of what you're doing. It's mostly the Milwaukee Public. They're going to be adding a bunch of records, all at once. But for everything else that you're doing, ordering, electronic ordering, paying off invoices, sending orders. All of that stuff is, you can just go about your business as usual. Nothing needs to change up until that night before we go live, and then we'll have instructions on what you need to do, clearing your payment history file, that type of thing. So that's pretty much all you have to worry about. At this point, I'd like to take any questions if there are any out there. And just so you know, we will have some Q&A sessions on March 26th and 27th. So anything that, for example, you forget about or doesn't come up today, you can certainly bring up at those 2 sessions that we'll have available. If anyone has any questions, please put those in the chat area if you can, and we'll address them as they come up. Okay, seeing as there's no questions yet, oh, okay, here we go. Justin's got one. He says, I only saw one option of post all in posting. Will there be an option to just post one at a time? I believe there is. I may not have highlighted it, but let's go back in there. So, okay, so we're here. If we click on select, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. If we go here, let's just use this as an example. I don't want to send anything, of course, but you have the same options here underneath select and post all. Virginia, are you still on the line? Is that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Can you explain? I mean, when you hit select, is it just selecting that one particular?
It's just selecting that particular pay file, and when you select it, it should give you the option if you just want to post.
I see. Okay.
So go ahead and select.
Right. Try it in here. Okay.
Okay, that's letting you go in. They might have us not all functioning here because what it's telling you to do now is put a new invoice in there. Mm-hmm. But it should have an option to just post one pay file.
Okay. All right. Yeah, if that's not working correctly, we'll take care of that immediately.
Yeah, because hopefully there should have been another option either on this screen or another one that said you could post it. Okay. Yeah, I think both of these are it's probably not a really good example because it is a test server, and God knows what, Yeah, and since it's a suspension, the only one that can go in there and do it is the person who suspended the pay file. Right, exactly. Okay. Yeah, it's not a really good answer, Justin, but I hope it's... If we do have a problem with that, that will be one of the first things we'll have to address. Are there any other questions related to acquisitions? Okay, seeing none, this is pretty much the end of the session. If you do have further questions, you always feel free to contact me via email or phone, and I'll do what I can to answer your questions before we go live. You should see, I'm hopeful that you'll see an email from me notifying you that the preview session's open, and they're telling me that we should be getting this context user set up, these logins that we need to alter to have that finished by Thursday or Friday of this week. So I'm hopeful that you'll get an email from me very soon.
So thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and if you have further questions, feel free to contact me. Thanks much, everybody.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Virginia.